Hi, this is Megan. This is my Reflect on Action video. It's a bit of a hodgepodge, but it's basically my beliefs about human behavior, how we've gotten to be where we are, and what might help us all in the future. I believe that for most of human history, the relational worldview applied to all people. We lived in small place-specific communities with spirituality in one form or another, providing cohesion, structure, and continuity. Sometime hundreds of years ago, societies in Western Europe began to move away from the relational worldview toward a more linear worldview. Maybe this shift started during the so-called Age of Enlightenment, with its extreme enthusiasm for logical thought and secularism. Or maybe the shift began back in the Middle Ages, an era marked by the Crusades and the emergence of the feudal system, both of which involved hoarding personal wealth and removing people from their homelands. I'm not certain why or when European society started to view the world in a linear, hyper-rational, individualistic way. Regardless, with the advent of colonialism, the relational worldview came under siege. By this I mean that colonizers sought to force their linear worldview upon everyone. In many respects, I feel like they succeeded. Capitalism reigns over us all. We all need to buy into the linear worldview to at least some degree. We need to engage in capitalistic, individualistic behavior in order to survive, so that we can have shelter, food, healthcare, etc. In effect, this cuts us off, isolates, and individualizes us. I'm not saying the relational worldview is now irrelevant. I think it applies to very many of us. I guess it just seems to me like it's not sufficient in and of itself right now. It seems to me that it doesn't encompass all human experience anymore, not even within indigenous communities. I hope one day we can all return to a way of life that ascribes to a relational worldview. In truth, I think that is the only path forward for our species. It seems to me like the majority of us have been left to try to navigate our way through life without a firm sense of belonging and tradition. We've been cut off because of colonization. This applies both to those colonized and to the colonizers. While preparing for this video, I thought about nearly everyone I know. The vast majority, regardless of culture or ethnicity, do not live in the neighborhood in which they grew up. We've become a species of migrants, for lack of a better word. College, jobs, marriage, the economy, not to mention existential angst, compel us to move away from whatever home was once to us, and then we find ourselves desperately trying to recreate home. This is the lens through which I see much of human behavior, the subconscious yearning for home, for a literal and figurative place where we feel safe, accepted, connected, and whole. I would even say that this is a subconscious yearning for a return to living solely from a relational worldview, a profound desire for a spiritual sense of belonging and relationship. We're all searching for this home with a capital H. But we're not united in our search because colonized society has separated us. We've been taught that there is a scarcity of resources, there's not enough to go around, so we pit ourselves against one another. What's more, because we lack a sense of safe belonging, we cling to our differences thinking they arm us with identity, when in reality it's those very differences that keep us from feeling the true sense of belonging that we yearn for. In our current society, most of us do not experience a profound cultural, spiritual, and ecological feeling of being home. But certain people have a much easier time feeling at least a basic sense of belonging, feeling a degree of safety and security, than others. White heterosexual males can rest easy knowing they're members of the dominant, colonizing race. Members of other cultures, ethnicities, sexual preferences, and gender do not enjoy this basic sense of safety and security. To varying degrees, people who are not white heterosexual males must work even harder to try to feel at home in this world, and unfortunately, many never actually do. I just read an article in the LA Times that talked about the sleep gap African Americans experience. They don't sleep as well as white people do due to anxiety, which adversely affects their health and productivity. The fact that some people in our society can't even fully relax while asleep truly exemplifies how unsettled, how homeless so many of us really are. How can people try to ascribe to a relational worldview when their very bodies don't feel safe, or when centuries of oppression and persecution have resulted in historical trauma? This is why I like the standpoint theory. It seems like it tries to account for these varying perspectives, these different lived experiences of inequality, suffering, and injustice. It recognizes that there is a dominant race and gender, and that the odds are stacked against those who do not exist in that privileged place. I like the eco-social theory too because it recognizes that we aren't isolated individuals. It sees us as part of a unified whole, connected not only to each other but to all of life. This is an undeniable truth that unfortunately is not widely acknowledged in our society. The more we realize that we are interconnected and interdependent, the less isolated we feel, the more we realize that we are at home in this world, and the harder we work to take care of ourselves, our communities, and our planet. I like the narrative model because it's collaborative and empowering, and because I think we do live via the stories we tell ourselves and each other. People can heal from traumatic experiences when they're able to incorporate them into their own personal narrative. This happened to me, and this is how I survived. It happened to me, but it's not who I am. I also recently read about the internal family systems model, and I really like it because of its belief in what it terms the self, the calm, wise, compassionate seat of consciousness we all possess but often ignore as we engage in various defensive coping mechanisms. The self in IFS sounds to me a lot like Buddhism's loving awareness, the soulful place we can learn to rest in by practicing mindfulness. When we learn to trust ourself and rest in loving awareness, we have the ability to always feel at home.
It seems to me that every person needs to be able to feel safe in their body and connected to others. Many people do not feel safe in their bodies due to the effects of colonization, racism, and trauma. Many people do not feel connected to others due to the individualistic nature of our capitalistic society. I think when you feel a profound sense of belonging, you feel it viscerally and spiritually. You feel secure in your body and yourself, knowing that you are part of all life. In my theoretical framework, I see suffering in all its forms arising out of this inability to feel belonging, the inability to feel truly at home. I see harmful human behaviors as desperate attempts to feel some sense of belonging, some sense of connection, some freedom from individualism. I believe social work can help promote healing on both the individual level and the societal level by promoting an awareness of interconnection and interdependence. Thank you for listening.